Welcome to A Setting of Silver. This podcast exists to make historic Christian writings accessible to 21st century listeners. While not as valuable as the Bible, we can still learn much from the faith and practice of those who followed in the footsteps of the apostles. It's my hope that wherever you find yourself, these words, carried through time, would encourage you to walk in faith with Jesus. This episode contains selections from two other Christians influenced by the Alexandrian Church, Anatolius and Theonas. While not particularly verbose writers, their surviving words speak to the substantial influence of the Church in this city. Anatolius was born in Alexandria around AD 230 and was lauded by Eusebius as an eminent man of learning and science. His fellow Alexandrians requested he open a school to teach Aristotelian philosophy, and his wisdom saved many citizens during the Roman siege of his city in 262. After this, he traveled to Syria where he was ordained in Caesarea, attended the synod against Paul of Samosata in Antioch, and finally, and quite unexpectedly, was appointed bishop of Laodicea as he was passing through the town. While he wrote few books, and few of those survived, what is presented here as his Paschal Canon. This document demonstrates how physics, orbital mechanics, and scripture can inform worship, as Anatolius draws upon his great knowledge to help the Church celebrate the Passover at the appropriate time of the year. And now, please enjoy the Paschal Canon of Anatolius of Alexandria.
As we are about to speak on the subject of the order of the times and alternations of the world, we shall first dispose of the positions of diverse calculators, who, by reckoning only by the course of the moon, and leaving out of account the ascent and descent of the sun, with the addition of certain problems, have constructed diverse periods, self-contradictory, and such as are never found in the reckoning of a true computation, since it is certain that no mode of computation is to be approved, in which these two measures are not found together. For even in the ancient exemplars, that is, in the books of the Hebrews and Greeks, we find not only the course of the moon, but also that of the sun, and, indeed, not simply its course in the general, but even the separate and minutest moments of its hours all calculated, as we shall show at the proper time, when the matter in hand demands it. Of these Hippolytus made up a period of 16 years with certain unknown courses of the moon. Others have reckoned by a period of 25 years, others by 30, and some by 84 years, without, however, teaching thereby an exact method of calculating Easter. But our predecessors, men most learned in the books of the Hebrews and Greeks, I mean Isidore and Jerome and Clement, although they have noted similar beginnings for the months just as they differ also in language, have, nevertheless, come harmoniously to one and the same most exact reckoning of Easter, day and month and season meeting in accord with the highest honor for the Lord's resurrection. But Origen also, the most erudite of all, and the acutest in making calculations, a man, too, to whom the epithet Chocutes is given, has published in a very elegant manner a little book on Easter. And in this book, while declaring, with respect to the day of Easter, that attention must be given not only to the course of the moon and the transit of the equinox, but also to the passage, transcensum, of the sun, which removes every foul ambush and offense of all darkness, and brings on the advent of light in the power and inspiration of the elements of the whole world. He speaks thus: in the matter of the day of Easter, he remarks, I do not say that it is to be observed that the Lord's day should be found, and the 7 days of the moon which are to elapse, but that the sun should pass that division, to wit, between light and darkness, constituted in an equality by the dispensation of the Lord at the beginning of the world, and that, from 1 hour to 2 hours, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 4, from 4 to 5, from 5 to 6 hours, while the light is increasing in the ascent of the sun, the darkness should decrease. And the addition of the 20th number being completed, 12 parts should be supplied in one and the same day. But if I should have attempted to add any little drop of mine after the exuberant streams of the eloquence and science of some, what else should there be to believe but that it should be ascribed by all to ostentation, and, to speak more truly, to madness? Did not the assistance of your promised prayers animate us for a little? For we believe that nothing is impossible to your power of prayer, and to your faith. Strengthened, therefore, by this confidence, we shall set bashfulness aside, and shall enter this most deep and unforeseen sea of the obscurest calculation, in which swelling questions and problems surge around us on all sides. There is, then, in the first year, the new moon of the first month, which is the beginning of every cycle of 19 years, on the 6th and 20th day of the month called by the Egyptians Faminoth. But, according to the months of the Macedonians, it is on the 2 and 20th day of Distress. And, as the Romans would say, it is on the 11th day before the calends of April. Now the sun is found on the said 6th and 20th day of Faminoth, not only as having mounted to the first segment, but as already passing the 4th day in it. And this segment they are accustomed to call the first dodecatemorion, 12th part, and the equinox, and the beginning of months, and the head of the cycle, and the starting point of the course of the planets. And the segment before this they call the last of the months, and the 12th segment, and the last dodecatemorion, and the end of the circuit of the planets. And for this reason, also, we maintain that those who place the first month in it, and who determine the 14th day of the Paschal season by it, make no trivial or common blunder. Nor is this an opinion confined to ourselves alone. For it was also known to the Jews of old and before Christ, and it was most carefully observed by them. And this may be learned from what Philo and Josephus and Musaeus have written, and not only from these, but indeed from others still more ancient, namely, the two Agathobuli, who were surnamed the Masters, and the eminent Aristobulus, who was one of the 70 who translated the sacred and holy scriptures of the Hebrews for Ptolemy Philadelphus and his father, and dedicated his exegetical books on the law of Moses to the same kings. These writers, in solving some questions which are raised with respect to Exodus, say that all alike ought to sacrifice the Passover after the vernal equinox in the middle of the first month. And that is found to be when the sun passes through the first segment of the solar, or, as some among them have named it, the zodiacal circle. But this Aristobulus also adds, that for the feast of the Passover it was necessary not only that the sun should pass the equinoctial segment, but the moon also. For as there are two equinoctial segments, the vernal and the autumnal, and these diametrically opposite to each other, and since the day of the Passover is fixed for the 14th day of the month, in the evening, the moon will have the position diametrically opposite the sun, as is to be seen in full moons. And the sun will thus be in the segment of the vernal equinox, and the moon necessarily will be at the autumnal equinox. I am aware that very many other matters were discussed by them, some of them with considerable probability, and others of them as matters of the clearest demonstration, by which they endeavor to prove that the festival of the Passover and unleavened bread ought by all means to be kept after the equinox. But I shall pass on without demanding such copious demonstrations, on subjects, from which the veil of the Mosaic law has been removed. For now it remains for us with unveiled face to behold ever as in a glass Christ himself and the doctrines and sufferings of Christ. But that the first month among the Hebrews is about the equinox, as clearly shown also by what is taught in the Book of Enoch. And, therefore, in this concurrence of the sun and moon, the Paschal festival is not to be celebrated, because as long as they are found in this course the power of darkness is not overcome. And as long as equality between light and darkness endures, and is not diminished by the light, it is shown that the Paschal festival is not to be celebrated. Accordingly, it is enjoined that that festival be kept after the equinox, because the moon of the 14th, if before the equinox or at the equinox, does not fill the whole night. But after the equinox, the moon of the 14th, with one day being added because of the passing of the equinox, although it does not extend to the true light, that is, the rising of the sun and the beginning of day, will nevertheless leave no darkness behind it. And, in accordance with this, Moses is charged by the Lord to keep 7 days of unleavened bread for the celebration of the Passover, that in them no power of darkness should be found to surpass the light. And although the outset of 4 nights begins to be dark, that is, the 17th and 18th and 19th and 20th, yet the moon of the 20th, which rises before that, does not permit the darkness to extend on even to midnight. To us, however, with whom it is impossible for all these things to come aptly at one and the same time, namely, the moon's 14th, and the Lord's Day, and the passing of the equinox, and whom the obligation of the Lord's resurrection binds to keep the Paschal festival on the Lord's Day, it is granted that we may extend the beginning of our celebration even to the moon's 20th. For although the moon of the 20th does not fill the whole night, yet, rising as it does in the second watch, it illumines the greater part of the night. Certainly if the rising of the moon should be delayed on to the end of 2 watches, that is to say, to midnight, the light would not then exceed the darkness, but the darkness the light. But it is clear that in the Paschal feast it is not possible that any part of the darkness should surpass the light. For the festival of the Lord's resurrection is one of light, and there is no fellowship between light and darkness. And if the moon should rise in the third watch, it is clear that the 22d or 23d of the moon would then be reached, in which it is not possible that there can be a true celebration of Easter. For those who determine that the festival may be kept at this age of the moon, are not only unable to make that good by the authority of Scripture, but turn also into the crime of sacrilege and contumacy, and incur the peril of their souls, inasmuch as they affirm that the true light may be celebrated along with something of that power of darkness which dominates all. Accordingly, it is not the case, as certain calculators of Gaul allege, that this assertion is opposed by that passage in Exodus, where we read, "In the first month, on the 14th day of the first month, at even, ye shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at even. 7 days shall there be no leaven found in your houses." From this they maintain that it is quite permissible to celebrate the Passover on the 21st day of the moon, understanding that if the 22nd day were added, there would be found 8 days of unleavened bread. A thing which cannot be found with any probability, indeed, in the Old Testament, as the Lord, through Moses, gives this charge, 7 days ye shall eat unleavened bread. Unless perchance the 14th day is not reckoned by them among the days of unleavened bread with the celebration of the feast. Which, however, is contrary to the word of the Gospel which says, "Moreover, on the first day of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus." And there is no doubt as to its being the 14th day on which the disciples asked the Lord, in accordance with the custom established for them of old, "Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover?" But they who are deceived with this error maintain this addition, because they do not know that the 13th and 14th, the 14th and 15th, the 15th and 16th, the 16th and 17th, the 17th and 18th, the 18th and 19th, the 19th and 20th, the 20th and 21st days of the moon are each found, as may be most surely proved, within a single day. For every day in the reckoning of the moon does not end in the evening as the same day in respect of number, as it is at its beginning in the morning. For the day which in the morning, that is up to the 6th hour and half, is numbered the 13th day of the month, is found at even to be the 14th. Wherefore, also, the Passover is enjoined to be extended on to the 21st day at even, which day, without doubt, in the morning, that is, up to that term of hours which we have mentioned, was reckoned the 20th. Calculate, then, from the end of the 13th day of the moon, which marks the beginning of the 14th, unto the end of the 20th, at which the 21st day also begins, and you will have only 7 days of unleavened bread, in which, by the guidance of the Lord, it has been determined before that the most true feast of the Passover ought to be celebrated. But what wonder is it that they should have erred in the matter of the 21st day of the moon who have added 3 days before the equinox, in which they hold that the Passover may be celebrated? An assertion which certainly must be considered altogether absurd, since, by the best-known historiographers of the Jews, and by the 70 elders, it has been clearly determined that the Paschal festival cannot be celebrated at the equinox. But nothing was difficult to them with whom it was lawful to celebrate the Passover on any day when the 14th of the moon happened after the equinox. Following their example up to the present time all the bishops of Asia, as themselves also receiving the rule from an unimpeachable authority, to wit, the evangelist John, who leant on the Lord's breast, and drank in instruction spiritual without doubt, were in the way of celebrating the Paschal feast, without question, every year, whenever the 14th day of the moon had come, and the lamb was sacrificed by the Jews after the equinox was past, not acquiescing, so far as regards this matter, with the authority of some, namely, the successors of Peter and Paul, who have taught all the churches in which they sowed the spiritual seeds of the gospel, that the solemn festival of the resurrection of the Lord can be celebrated only on the Lord's day. Whence, also, a certain contention broke out between the successors of these, namely, Victor, at that time bishop of the city of Rome, and Polycrates, who then appeared to hold the primacy among the bishops of Asia. And this contention was adjusted most rightfully by Irenaeus, at that time president of a part of Gaul, so that both parties kept by their own order, and did not decline from the original custom of antiquity. The one party, indeed, kept the Paschal day on the 14th day of the first month, according to the Gospel, as they thought, adding nothing of an extraneous kind, but keeping through all things the rule of faith. And the other party, passing the day of the Lord's Passion as one replete with sadness and grief, hold that it should not be lawful to celebrate the Lord's mystery of the Passover at any other time but on the Lord's day, on which the resurrection of the Lord from death took place, and on which rose also for us the cause of everlasting joy. For it is one thing to act in accordance with the precept given by the apostle, yea, by the Lord himself, and be sad with the sad, and suffer with him that suffers by the cross, his own word being, My soul is exceeding sorrowful, even unto death. And it is another thing to rejoice with the victor as he triumphs over an ancient enemy, and exults with the highest triumph over a conquered adversary. As he himself also says, Rejoice with me, for I have found the sheep which I had lost. Moreover, the allegation which they sometimes make against us, that if we pass the moon's 14th we cannot celebrate the beginning of the Paschal feast in light, neither moves nor disturbs us. For, although they lay it down as a thing unlawful, that the beginning of the Paschal festival should be extended so far as to the moon's 20th, yet they cannot deny that it ought to be extended to the 16th and 17th, which coincide with the day on which the Lord rose from the dead. But we decide that it is better that it should be extended even unto the 20th day, on account of the Lord's day, than that we should anticipate the Lord's day on account of the 14th day. For on the Lord's day was it that light was shown to us in the beginning, and now also in the end, the comforts of all present and the tokens of all future blessings. For the Lord ascribes no less praise to the 20th day than to the 14th. For in the book of Leviticus the injunction is expressed thus, In the first month, on the 14th day of this month, at even, is the Lord's Passover. And on the 15th day of this month is the feast of unleavened bread unto the Lord. 7 days ye shall eat unleavened bread. The first day shall be to you one most diligently attended and holy. Ye shall do no servile work thereon. And the 7th day shall be to you more diligently attended and holier. Ye shall do no servile work thereon. And hence we maintain that those have contracted no guilt before the tribunal of Christ, who have held that the beginning of the Paschal festival ought to be extended to this day. And this, too, the most especially, as we are pressed by 3 difficulties, namely, that we should keep the solemn festival of the Passover on the Lord's day, and after the equinox, and yet not beyond the limit of the moon's 20th day. But this again is held by other wise and most acute men to be an impossibility, because within that narrow and most contracted limit of a cycle of 19 years, a thoroughly genuine Paschal time, that is to say, one held on the Lord's day and yet after the equinox, cannot occur. But, in order that we may set in a clearer light the difficulty which causes their incredulity, we shall set down, along with the courses of the moon, that cycle of years which we have mentioned, the days being computed before in which the year rolls on in its alternating courses, by calends and ides and nuns, and by the sun's ascent and descent. The moon's age set forth in the Julian calendar. January on the calends, 1 day, the moon's 1st day, on the nuns, the 5th day, the moon's 5th, on the ides, the 13th day, the moon's 13th. On the day before the calends of February, the 31st day, the moon's 1st, on the calends of February, the 32d day, the moon's 2d, on the nuns, the 36th day, the moon's 6th, on the ides, the 44th day, the moon's 14th. On the day before the calends of March, the 59th day, the moon's 29th, on the calends of March, the 60th day, the moon's 1st, on the nuns, the 66th day, the moon's 7th, on the ides, the 74th day, the moon's 15th. On the day before the calends of April, the 90th day, the moon's 2d, on the calends of April, the 91st day, the moon's 3d, on the nuns, the 95th day, the moon's 7th, on the ides, the 103d day, the moon's 15th. On the day before the calends of May, the 120th day, the moon's 3d, on the calends of May, the 121st day, the moon's 4th, on the nuns, the 127th day, the moon's 10th, on the ides, the 135th day, the moon's 18th. On the day before the calends of June, the 151st day, the moon's 3d, on the calends of June, the 152d day, the moon's 5th, on the nuns, the 153d day, the moon's 9th, on the ides, the 164th day, the moon's 17th. On the day before the calends of July, the 181st day, the moon's 5th, on the calends of July, the 182d day, the moon's 6th, on the nuns, the 188th day, the moon's 12th, on the ides, the 196th day, the moon's 20th. On the day before the calends of August, the 212th day, the moon's 5th, on the calends of August, the 213th day, the moon's 7th, on the nuns, the 217th day, the moon's 12th, on the ides, the 225th day, the moon's 19th. On the day before the calends of September, the 243d day, the moon's 7th, on the calends of September, the 244th day, the moon's 8th. On the nuns, the 248th day, the moon's 12th. On the Ides, the 256th day, the moon's 20th. On the day before the calends of October, the 273d day, the moon's 8th. On the calends of October, the 247th day, the moon's 9th. On the nuns, the 280th day, the moon's 15th. On the Ides, the 288th day, the moon's 23d. On the day before the calends of November, the 304th day, the moon's 9th. On the calends of November, the 305th day, the moon's 10th. On the nuns, the 309th day, the moon's 14th. On the Ides, the 317th day, the moon's 22d. On the day before the calends of December, the 334th day, the moon's 10th. On the calends of December, the 335th day, the moon's 11th. On the nuns, the 339th day, the moon's 15th. On the Ides, the 347th day, the moon's 23d. On the day before the calends of January, the 365th day, the moon's 11th. On the calends of January, the 366th day, the moon's 12th. The Paschal or Easter table of Anatolius. Now, then, after the reckoning of the days and the exposition of the course of the moon, whereon the whole revolves on to its end, the cycle of the years may be set forth from the commencement. This makes the Passover, Easter season, circulate between the 6th day before the calends of April and the 9th before the calends of May, according to the following table. Equinox, moon, Easter, moon. Sabbath, 26. 15th before the calends of May, i.e., the 17th of April, 18. Lord's Day, 7. Calends of April, i.e., the 1st of April, 14. Iid Day, ferial, 18. 11th before the calends of May, i.e., the 21st of April, 16. Iid Day, 29. Ides of April, i.e., the 13th of April, 19. Fourth day, x, 4th before the calends of April, i.e., the 29th of March, 14. Fifth day, 21. 14th before the calends of May, i.e., the 18th of April, 16. Sabbath, 2. 6th before the calends of April, i.e., the 27th of March, 17. Lord's Day, 13. Calends of April, i.e., 1st of April, XX. Iid Day, 24. 18th before the calends of May, i.e., the 14th of March, 15. Iid Day, v. 8th before the Ides of April, i.e., the 6th of April, 15. Fourth day, 16. 4th before the calends of April, i.e., the 29th of March, XX. Fifth day, 27. Iid before the Ides of April, i.e., the 11th of April, 15. Sixth day, 8. Iid before the nuns of April, i.e., the 3rd of April, 17. Sabbath, XX. 9th before the calends of May, i.e., the 23rd of April, XX. Lord's Day, I. 6th before the Ides of April, i.e., the 8th of April, 15. Iid Day, 12. Iid before the calends of April, i.e., the 31st of March, 18. Fourth day, 23. 14th before the calends of May, i.e., the 18th of April, 19. Fifth day, IV. Iid before the nuns of April, i.e., the 4th of April, 14. Sixth day, 15. 6th before the calends of April, i.e., the 27th of March, 17. This cycle of 19 years is not approved of by certain African investigators who have drawn up larger cycles, because it seems to be somewhat opposed to their surmises and opinions. For these make up the best proved accounts according to their calculation, and determine a certain beginning or certain end for the Easter season, so as that the Paschal festival shall not be celebrated before the 11th day before the calends of April, i.e., the 24th of March, nor after the moon's 21st, and the 11th day before the calends of May, i.e., the 21st of April. But we hold that these are limits not only not to be followed, but to be detested and overturned. For even in the ancient law it is laid down that this is to be seen to, viz. that the Passover be not celebrated before the transit of the vernal equinox, at which the last of the autumnal term is overtaken, on the 14th day of the first month, which is one calculated not by the beginnings of the day, but by those of the moon. And as this has been sanctioned by the charge of the Lord, and is in all things accordant with the Catholic faith, it cannot be doubtful to any wise man that to anticipate it must be a thing unlawful and perilous. And, accordingly, this only is it sufficient for all the saints and Catholics to observe, namely, that giving no heed to the diverse opinions of very many, they should keep the solemn festival of the Lord's resurrection within the limits which we have set forth. Furthermore, as to the proposal subjoined to your epistle, that I should attempt to introduce into this little book some notice of the ascent and descent of the sun, which is made out in the distribution of days and nights. The matter proceeds thus: in 15 days and half an hour, the sun ascending by so many minutes, that is, by 4 in one day, from the 8th day before the calends of January, i.e., the 25th of December, to the 8th before the calends of April, i.e., the 25th of March, an hour is taken up, at which date there are 12 hours and a 12th. On this day, towards evening, if it happened also to be the moon's 14th, the lamb was sacrificed among the Jews. But if the number went beyond that, so that it was the moon's 15th or 16th on the evening of the same day, on the 14th day of the second moon, in the same month, the Passover was celebrated, and the people ate unleavened bread for 7 days, up to the 21st day at evening. Hence, if it happens in like manner to us, that the 7th day before the calends of April, the 26th of March, proves to be both the Lord's Day and the moon's 14th, Easter is to be celebrated on the 14th. But if it proves to be the moon's 15th or 16th, or any day up to the 20th, then our regard for the Lord's resurrection, which took place on the Lord's Day, will lead us to celebrate it on the same principle. Yet this should be done so as that the beginning of Easter may not pass beyond the close of their festival, that is to say, the moon's 20th. And therefore we have said that those parties have committed no trivial offense who have ventured either on anticipating or on going beyond this number, which is given us in the divine scriptures themselves. And from the 8th day before the calends of April, the 25th of March, to the 8th before the calends of July, the 24th of June, in 15 days an hour is taken up, the sun ascending every day by 2 minutes and a half, and the 6th part of a minute. And from the 8th day before the calends of July, the 24th of June, to the 8th before the calends of October, the 24th of September, in like manner, in 15 days and 4 hours, an hour is taken up, the sun descending every day by the same number of minutes. And the space remaining on to the 8th day before the calends of January, the 25th of December, is determined in a similar number of hours and minutes. So that thus on the 8th day before the calends of January, for the hour there is the hour and half. For up to that day and night are distributed. And the 12 hours which were established at the vernal equinox in the beginning by the Lord's dispensation, being distributed over the night on the 8th before the calends of July, the sun ascending through those 18 several degrees which we have noted, shall be found conjoined with the longer space in the 12th. And, again, the 12 hours which should be fulfilled at the autumnal equinox in the sun's descent, should be found disjoined on the 6th before the calends of January as 6 hours divided into 12, the night holding 18 divided into 12. And on the 8th before the calends of July, in like manner, it held 6 divided into 12. Be not ignorant of this, however, that those 4 determining periods, which we have mentioned, although they are approximated to the calends of the following months, yet hold each the middle of a season, viz. of spring and summer, and autumn and winter. And the beginnings of the seasons are not to be fixed at that point at which the calends of the month begin. But each season is to be begun in such way that the equinox divides the season of spring from its first day, and the season of summer is divided by the 8th day before the calends of July, and that of autumn by the 8th before the calends of October, and that of winter by the 8th before the calends of January in like manner.
Finally, we also have fragments of Anatolius's books on arithmetic, demonstrating his learning of the natural sciences. Please enjoy this rendition of Anatolius's work.
Aristotle thinks that all philosophy consisted of theory and practice, and divides the practical into ethical and political, and the theoretic again into the theological, the physical, and the mathematical. And thus very clearly and skillfully he shows that mathematics is a branch of philosophy. The Chaldeans were the originators of astronomy, and the Egyptians of geometry and arithmetic. And whence did mathematics derive its name? Those of the peripatetic school affirmed that in rhetoric and poetry, and in the popular music, anyone may be an adept though he has gone through no process of study, but that in those pursuits properly called studies, none can have any real knowledge unless he has first become a student of them. Hence they supposed that the theory of these things was called mathematics, from mathema, study, science. And the followers of Pythagoras are said to have given this more distinctive name of mathematics to geometry and arithmetic alone. For of old these had each its own separate name, and they had up till then no name common to both. And he, Archytas, gave them this name, because he found science in them, and that in a manner suitable to man's study. For they, the Pythagoreans, perceived that these studies dealt with things eternal and immutable and perfect, in which things alone they considered that science consisted. But the more recent philosophers have given a more extensive application to this name, so that, in their opinion, the mathematician deals not only with substances incorporeal, and falling simply within the province of the understanding, but also with that which touches upon corporeal and sensible matter. For he ought to be cognizant of the course of the stars, and their velocity, and their magnitudes, and forms, and distances. And, besides, he ought to investigate their dispositions to vision, examining into the causes, why they are not seen as of the same form and of the same size from every distance, retaining, indeed, as we know them to do, their dispositions relative to each other, but producing, at the same time, deceptive appearances, both in respect of order and position. And these are so, either as determined by the state of the heavens and the air, or as seen in reflecting and all polished surfaces and in transparent bodies, and in all similar kinds. In addition to this, they thought that the man ought to be versed in mechanics and geometry and dialectics. And still further, that he should engage himself with the causes of the harmonious combination of sounds, and with the composition of music, which things are bodies, or at least are to be ultimately referred to sensible matter. What is mathematics? Mathematics is a theoretic science of things apprehensible by perception and sensation for communication to others. And before this a certain person indulging in a joke, while hitting his mark, said that mathematics is that science to which Homer's description of discord may be applied. Small at her birth, but rising every hour. While scarce the skies her horrid, mighty head can bound. She stalks on earth and shakes the world around. For it begins with a point and a line, and forthwith it takes heaven itself and all things within its compass. How many divisions are there of mathematics? Of the more notable and the earliest mathematics there are two principal divisions, viz. Arithmetic and geometry. And of the mathematics which deals with things sensible there are 6 divisions, viz. Computation, practical arithmetic, geodesy, optics, theoretical music, mechanics, and astronomy. But that neither the so-called tactics nor architecture, nor the popular music, nor physics, nor the art which is called equivocally the mechanical, constitutes, as some think, a branch of mathematics, we shall prove, as the discourse proceeds, clearly and systematically. As to the circle having 8 solids and 6 superficies and 4 angles, what branches of arithmetic have closest affinity with each other? Computation and theoretical music have a closer affinity than others with arithmetic. For this department, being one also of quantity and ratio, approaches it in number and proportion. Optics and geodesy, again, are more in affinity with geometry. And mechanics and astrology are in general affinity with both. As to mathematics having its principles in hypothesis and about hypothesis. Now, the term hypothesis is used in 3 ways, or indeed in many ways. For according to one usage of the term we have the dramatic revolution. And in this sense there are said to be hypotheses in the dramas of Euripides. According to a second meaning, we have the investigation of matters in the special in rhetoric. And in this sense the sophists say that a hypothesis must be proposed. And, according to a third signification, the beginning of a proof is called a hypothesis, as being the begging of certain matters with a view to the establishment of another in question. Thus it is said that Democritus used a hypothesis, namely, that of atoms and a vacuum, and Asclepiades that of atoms and pores. Now, when applied to mathematics, the term hypothesis is to be taken in the third sense. That Pythagoras was not the only one who duly honored arithmetic, but that his best-known disciples did so too, being wont to say that, all things fit number. That arithmetic has as its immediate end chiefly the theory of science, than which there is no end either greater or nobler. And its second end is to bring together in one all that is found in determinate substance. Who among the mathematicians has made any discovery? Eusebius relates in his astrologies that Enopides found out the circle of the zodiac and the cycle of the great year. And Thales discovered the eclipse of the sun and its period in the tropics and its constant inequality. And Anaximander discovered that the Earth is poised in space, and moves round the axis of the universe. And Anaximenes discovered that the Moon has her light from the Sun, and found out also the way in which she suffers eclipse. And the rest of the mathematicians have also made additions to these discoveries. We may instance the facts, that the fixed stars move round the axis passing through the poles, while the planets remove from each other round the perpendicular axis of the zodiac, and that the axis of the fixed stars and the planets is the side of a pentadecagon with 24 parts.
Very little is known about Theonas of Alexandria, other than that he succeeded Maximus as bishop at Alexandria and held office there for 19 years, placing him in the city between AD 282 and 300. Unfortunately, the only writing we have of his is a letter to Lucianus, the chief chamberlain for the emperor. The point of the letter is fairly straightforward, as Theonas exhorts Lucianus to exercise his duties in accordance with his faith. It serves as a reminder to all Christians today who hold public office, many in regimes hostile to Christianity, that by managing the public trust with skill, virtue, and diligence we can bring glory to God and demonstrate in some small way the lordship of Christ. And now, please enjoy this epistle from Theonas of Alexandria to the chief chamberlain of the emperor.
Bishop Theonas to Lucianus, the chief chamberlain of our most invincible emperor. I give thanks to Almighty God and our Lord Jesus Christ, who has not given over the manifesting of his faith throughout the whole world, as the sole specific for our salvation, and the extending of it even in the course of the persecutions of despots. Yea, like gold reduced in the furnace, it has only been made to shine the more under the storms of persecution, and its truth and grandeur have only become always the more and more illustrious. So that now, peace being granted to the churches by our gracious Prince, the works of Christians are shining even in sight of the unbelieving, and God your Father, who is in heaven, is glorified thereby. A thing which, if we desire to be Christians in deed rather than in word, we ought to seek and aspire after as our first object on account of our salvation. For if we seek our own glory, we set our desire upon a vain and perishing object, and one which leads ourselves on to death. But the glory of the Father and of the Son, who for our salvation was nailed to the cross, makes us safe for the everlasting redemption, and that is the greatest hope of Christians. Wherefore, my Lucianus, I neither suppose nor desire that you should make it a matter of boasting, that by your means many persons belonging to the palace of the emperor have been brought to the knowledge of the truth. But rather does it become us to give the thanks to our God who has made thee a good instrument for a good work, and has raised thee to great honor with the emperor, that you might diffuse the sweet savor of the Christian name to his own glory and to the salvation of many. For just the more completely that the emperor himself, though not yet attached to the Christian religion, has entrusted the care of his life and person to these same Christians as his more faithful servants, so much the more careful ought ye to be, and the more diligent and watchful in seeing to his safety and in attending upon him, so that the name of Christ may be greatly glorified thereby, and his faith extended daily through you who wait upon the emperor. For in old times some former princes thought us malevolent and filled with all manner of crime. But now, seeing your good works, they should not be able to avoid glorifying Christ himself. Therefore you ought to strive to the utmost of your power not to fall into a base or dishonorable, not to say an absolutely flagitious way of thinking, lest the name of Christ be thus blasphemed even by you. Be it far from you that you should sell the privilege of access to the emperor to any one for money, or that you should by any means place a dishonest account of any affair before your prince, won over either by prayers or by bribes. Let all the lust of avarice be put from you, which serves the cause of idolatry rather than the religion of Christ. No filthy lucre, no duplicity, can befit the Christian who embraces the simple and unadorned Christ. Let no scurrilous or base talk have place among you. Let all things be done with modesty, courteousness, affability, and uprightness, so that the name of our God and Lord Jesus Christ may be glorified in all. Discharge the official duties to which you are severally appointed with the utmost fear of God and affection to your prince, and perfect carefulness. Consider that every command of the emperor which does not offend God has proceeded from God himself, and execute it in love as well as in fear, and with all cheerfulness. For there is nothing which so well refreshes a man who is wearied out with weighty cares as the seasonable cheerfulness and benign patience of an intimate servant. Nor, again, on the other hand, does anything so much annoy and vex him as the moroseness and impatience and grumbling of his servant. Be such things far from you Christians, whose walk is in zeal for the faith. But in order that God may be honored in yourselves, suppress ye and tread down all your vices of mind and body. Be clothed with patience and courtesy, be replenished with the virtues and the hope of Christ. Bear all things for the sake of your Creator himself. Endure all things. Overcome and get above all things, that ye may win Christ the Lord. Great are these duties, and full of painstaking. But he that striveth for the mastery is temperate in all things, and they do it to obtain a corruptible crown, but we an incorruptible. But because, as I apprehend it, ye are assigned to different offices, and you, Lucianus, are styled the head of them all, whom, also, by the grace of Christ given you, you are able to direct and dispose in their different spheres, I am certain that it will not displease you if I also bring before your notice, in a particular and summary manner, some of my sentiments on the subject of these offices. For I hear that one of you keeps the private moneys of the emperor, another the imperial robes and ornaments, another the precious vessels, another the books, who, I understand, does not as yet belong to the believers, and others the different parts of the household goods. And in what manner, therefore, these charges ought, in my judgment, to be executed, I shall indicate in a few words. He who has charge of the private moneys of the emperor ought to keep everything in an exact reckoning. He should be ready at any time to give an accurate account of all things. He should note down everything in writing, if it is at all possible, before giving money to another. He should never trust such things to his memory, which, being drawn off day by day to other matters, readily fails us, so that, without writing, we sometimes honestly certify things which have never existed. Neither should this kind of writing be of a commonplace order, but such as easily and clearly unfolds all things, and leaves the mind of the inquirer without any scruple or doubt on the subject, a thing which will easily be effected if a distinct and separate account is kept in writing of all receipts, and of the time when, and the person by whom, and the place at which they were made. And, in like manner, all that is paid out to others, or expended by order of the emperor, should be entered in its own place by itself in the reckoning. And that servant should be faithful and prudent, so that his Lord may rejoice that he has set him over his goods, and may glorify Christ in him. Nor will the diligence and care of that servant be less who has the custody of the robes and imperial ornaments. All these he should enter in a most exact catalogue, and he should keep a note of what they are and of what sort, and in what places stored, and when he received them, and from whom, and whether they are soiled or unsoiled. All these things he should keep in his diligence. He should often review again, and he should often go over them that they may be the more readily known again. All these he should have at hand, and all in readiness, and he should always give the clearest information on every matter on which it is sought, to his prince or his superior, whenever they ask about anything, and all this at the same time in such wise that everything may be done in humility and cheerful patience, and that the name of Christ may be praised even in a small matter. In a similar manner should he conduct himself to whose fidelity are entrusted the vessels of silver and gold, and crystal or mora, for eating or for drinking. All these he should arrange suitably, of them all he should keep an account, and with all diligence he should make an inventory of how many and which sort of precious stones are in them. He should examine them all with great prudence, he should produce them in their proper places and on their proper occasions. And he should observe most carefully to whom he gives them, and at what time, and from whom he receives them again, lest there should occur any mistake or injurious suspicion, or perhaps some considerable loss in things of value. The most responsible person, however, among you, and also the most careful, will be he who may be entrusted by the emperor with the custody of his library. He will himself select for this office a person of proved knowledge, a man grave and adapted to great affairs, and ready to reply to all applications for information, such a one as Philadelphus chose for this charge, and appointed to the superintendence of his most noble library. I mean Aristeus, his confidential chamberlain, whom he sent also as his legate to Eleazar, with most magnificent gifts, in recognition of the translation of the sacred scriptures. And this person also wrote the full history of the 70 interpreters. If, therefore, it should happen that a believer in Christ is called to this same office, he should not despise that secular literature and those Gentile intellects which please the emperor. To be praised are the poets for the greatness of their genius, the acuteness of their inventions, the aptness and lofty eloquence of their style. To be praised are the orators, to be praised also are the philosophers in their own class. To be praised, too, are the historians, who unfold to us the order of exploits and the manners and institutions of our ancestors, and show us the rule of life from the proceedings of the ancients. On occasion also he will endeavor to laud the divine scriptures, which, with marvelous care and most liberal expenditure, Ptolemy Philadelphus caused to be translated into our language. And sometimes, too, the Gospel and the Apostle will be lauded for their divine oracles. And there will be an opportunity for introducing the mention of Christ, and, little by little, his exclusive divinity will be explained. And all these things may happily come to pass by the help of Christ. He ought, therefore, to know all the books which the emperor possesses. He should often turn them over, and arrange them neatly in their proper order by catalogue. If, however, he shall have to get new books, or old ones transcribed, he should be careful to obtain the most accurate copyists. And if that cannot be done, he should appoint learned men to the work of correction, and recompense them justly for their labors. He should also cause all manuscripts to be restored according to their need, and should embellish them, not so much with mere superstitious extravagance, as with useful adornment. And therefore he should not aim at having the whole manuscripts written on purple skins and in letters of gold, unless the emperor has specially required that. With the utmost submission, however, he should do everything that is agreeable to Caesar. As he is able, he should, with all modesty, suggest to the emperor that he should read, or hear read, those books which suit his rank and honor, and minister to good use rather than to mere pleasure. He should himself first be thoroughly familiar with those books, and he should often commend them in presence of the emperor, and set forth, in an appropriate fashion, the testimony and the weight of those who approve them, that he may not seem to lean to his own understanding only. Those, moreover, who have the care of the emperor's person should be in all things as prompt as possible. Always, as we have said, cheerful in countenance, sometimes merry, but ever with such perfect modesty as that he may commend it above all else in you all, and perceive that it is the true product of the religion of Christ. You should also all be elegant and tidy in person and attire, yet, at the same time, not in such wise as to attract notice by extravagance or affectation, lest Christian modesty be scandalized. Let everything be ready at its proper time, and disposed as well as possible in its own order. There should also be due arrangement among you, and carefulness that no confusion appear in your work, nor any loss of property in any way. And appropriate places should be settled and suitably prepared, in accordance with the capacity, captu, and importance of the places. Besides this, your servants should be the most thoroughly honest, and circumspect, and modest, and as serviceable to you as possible. And see that you instruct and teach them in true doctrine with all the patience and charity of Christ. But if they despise and lightly esteem your instructions, then dismiss them, lest their wickedness by any hap recoil upon yourselves. For sometimes we have seen, and often we have heard, how masters have been held in ill repute in consequence of the wickedness of their servants. If the emperor visits her imperial majesty, or she him, then should ye also be most circumspect in eye and demeanor, and in all your words. Let her mark your mastery of yourselves and your modesty, and let her followers and attendants mark your demeanor. Let them mark it and admire it, and by reason thereof praise Jesus Christ our Lord in you. Let your conversation always be temperate and modest, and seasoned with religion as with salt. And, further, let there be no jealousy among you or contentiousness, which might bring you into all manner of confusion and division, and thus also make you objects of aversion to Christ and to the emperor, and lead you into the deepest abomination, so that not one stone of your building could stand upon another. And do thou, my dearest Lucianus, since thou art wise, bear with good will the unwise, and they too may perchance become wise. Do no one an injury at any time, and provoke no one to anger. If an injury is done to you, look to Jesus Christ, and even as ye desire that he may remit your transgressions, do ye also forgive them theirs. And then also shall ye do away with all ill will, and bruise the head of that ancient serpent, who is ever on the watch with all subtlety to undo your good works and your prosperous attainments. Let no day pass by without reading some portion of the sacred scriptures, at such convenient hour as offers, and giving some space to meditation. And never cast off the habit of reading in the Holy Scriptures, for nothing feeds the soul and enriches the mind so well as those sacred studies do. But look to this as the chief gain you are to make by them, that, in all due patience, ye may discharge the duties of your office religiously and piously, that is, in the love of Christ, and despise all transitory objects for the sake of his eternal promises, which in truth surpass all human comprehension and understanding, and shall conduct you into everlasting felicity. A happy adieu to you in Christ, my Lord Lucianus.
Thanks for listening to this episode of A Setting of Silver. The audio you've been listening to was produced by Bill Connick using Google's text-to-speech service. The text was taken from an 1885 collection of early church writings available at ccel.org. Finally, I want to thank the volunteers at CCEL who organized and formatted the data into a computer-friendly format. Without their work, this would have been practically impossible to create.